Welcome to PandaAudioBooks, the perfect place for a huge collection of fantasy novels. If you enjoy my content and want to support my work, a small contribution via PayPal is greatly appreciated. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell to stay updated with our latest audiobook chapters. Chapter 516, Demon Echo Grass. Foregoing any needless pretensions, Han Li bluntly asked, "Does fellow Daoist Jiu happen to know about Thousand Leaf Dew?" Thousand Leaf Dew. Jiu paused for a moment before quickly replying in a mutter, "This name has a bit of an impression on me. Had you asked me about it a few years ago, I would have had no idea. In the past 2 years, this junior obtained an ancient record that happened to mention it. This junior happens to have a duplication of it on a jade slip. Would senior like to take a look at it?" Having said that, Jiu revealed a somewhat cautious expression. Han Li rejoiced and couldn't help but reveal excitement in his eyes. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Han Li smiled and said, "It is even better that you have the records. If I do find it, then I must truly thank you." Jiu was also quite pleased. Being able to receive the favor of a core formation cultivator was a truly fortunate matter. He quickly patted down his body before taking out a yellow jade slip and presenting to Han Li with both hands. Jiu respectfully said, "This is the jade slip. Please examine it, senior." Han Li bluntly accepted the jade slip and quickly immersed his spiritual sense into it. In a mere moment, Han Li's expression changed from excitement to doubt and then contemplation. Li Zun carefully watched Han Li's every movement. Upon seeing Han Li's expression change several times, an indescribable emotion flickered from his eyes. Jiu was particularly apprehensive, fearing that the Thousand Leaves Dew that was mentioned in the jade slip wasn't the item Han Li was searching for. Han Li eventually recalled his spiritual sense from the jade slip and slowly said, "Yes, this is the item." However, the excitement in his eyes had greatly faded. After the old man's gaze flickered, he probed, "What is it? Is there something troublesome about the Thousand Leaves Dew?" Han Li bitterly smiled. "I didn't expect that this item would be so troublesome to acquire. It's closely related to grade 8 demon beasts." Li Zun shockingly glanced at Han Li with an expression of disbelief. "Grade 8 demon beasts?" Han Li sighed and helplessly explained, "That's right. The Thousand Leaves Dew is actually an extract of Demon Echo Grass. To be more exact, from Demon Echo Grass that grows close to grade 8 demon beasts." Li Zun was left speechless by Han Li's words. He naturally knew what Demon Echo Grass was. It was something that often grew near demon beast nests, as it required long years of exposure to demonic chi to grow and sustain itself. However, Demon Echo Grass found near the den of a grade 8 demon beast was an entirely different matter altogether. Although it was rumored that grade 9 and even grade 10 demon beasts had been sighted in the outer star seas, at the end of the day, they had only appeared in rumors. As for the old man, the highest grade demon beast he had seen at Blackrock City was a grade 7 demon beast, let alone a grade 8 demon beast. Li Zun saw that Han Li's gaze held a trace of astonishment and discouragement. Just what kind of precious medicine pill did he plan on refining to actually require such an incredulous material? After toying with the jade slip in his hand, he revealed a trace of hesitation before saying something to Jiu that surprised him. "This jade slip has some records that I may need to further examine in the future. Would it be acceptable for fellow Daoist Jiu to give this jade slip to me?" Jiu paused for a moment and then frankly said, "If senior has a use for it, then please feel free to take it." Seeing that Jiu was being quite agreeable, Han Li nodded his head and flipped his hand, summoning a small bottle and a talisman with a drawing of a small yellow sword on it. "As your senior, I naturally can't let you come out of this empty-handed. The bottle has some medicine pills that can increase your cultivation, and this is a treasure talisman. Go ahead and take them." Han Li then casually tossed the items over to him. "Many thanks for senior's generosity." After receiving the items, Jiu was unable to contain his joy and repeatedly thanked Han Li. To a chi condensation cultivator like himself, these items were truly precious. "Since Senior Crooked Soul has already bestowed treasures upon you, you may leave for the time being, Jiu." Li Shu was quite shocked at Han Li's display of generosity, but he still remembered to dismiss Gu with a calm expression. In the blink of an eye, they were once again the only two people in the room. Is there anything else that I may assist you with apart from that matter? Please don't hesitate to ask. Li Zun spoke in an exceptionally forthright manner. Since that's the case, there is one other thing that I wish to trouble you with. Might you be selling the horn of an agate beast? He, fellow Daoist came to the right place. Although agate beast horn is an exceptionally rare material, I managed to purchase 2 such horns last month. If fellow Daoist desires it, I can sell one to you right away. The old man clapped his hands with a smile and immediately gave the order for it to be delivered without a moment of pause. Pleasant surprise appeared on Han Li's face as he repeatedly expressed his thanks. Not long after, a young servant entered the room while carrying an exquisite wooden box on a silver plate. Fellow Daoist, take a look. Does this agate horn fulfill your expectations? Han Li solemnly nodded his head and reached out to the wooden box. As soon as he opened the box, blue light was released, revealing a half-foot-long spiral horn. The sharp horn shined with a strikingly brilliant blue light. Han Li then closed the wooden box with a satisfied expression. Not bad. This will be quite suitable. Could fellow Daoist tell me how many spirit stones this will cost? Li Zun pleasantly smiled and said, this store acquired the horn for 5,000 spirit stones. Since fellow Daoist requires it, you only need to return the cost. Naturally, Han Li wasn't going to haggle over the price. He immediately expressed his thanks and took out the equivalent in mid-grade spirit stones before handing it over to the old man. The old man received the spirit stones with a wave of his sleeve and then asked with a wide smile, does fellow Daoist Crooked Soul have any plans in mind following his arrival on the island? Although fellow Daoist's magic power is profound, the demon beasts here are truly hard to handle. No small number of core formation cultivators have been seriously injured by tackling the seas alone. How about I introduce you to a few similar grade cultivators? It would be considerably safer if you were to set out to sea together. Han Li smiled upon hearing this. The purpose of the old man's courteous and friendly behavior from the beginning was for drawing him in. Many thanks for fellow Daoist Li's kindness. However, I must soon prepare to refine a few medicine pills. And after I consume the pills, I will have to enter seclusion for some time. I won't be heading out to hunt demon beasts in the near future. Han Li gave a smooth refusal with an embarrassed expression, but in truth, he was absolutely unwilling to travel out to sea with unfamiliar cultivators. Although a trace of disappointment flickered across his face, he immediately continued without a care. That is fine too. It is considerably safer to first increase one's cultivation and one's familiarity with the region. However, if fellow Daoist Crooked Soul does later wish to find companions, please don't forget about me. Han Li naturally agreed and further chatted with the old man for a moment before taking his leave. The old man saw Han Li off at the building's exit before returning inside. Just as the old man sat down, he suddenly heard a voice calmly say, "How about it? Will this person be useful to us?" A vague silhouette soon emerged from the landscape painting on the wall, bringing forth another person into the room. The white-clothed man remained in the air while covered in azure light, making for a rather mysterious display. The old man confidently said, "There is no need to worry. Although we only chatted for a short moment, from his strange appearance, that cultivator Crooked Soul should be a vagrant cultivator that travels alone. So long as he witnesses the dangers of traveling the depths alone, he will come to know the advantages of my offer. He will come back sooner or later." The white-clothed man coldly refuted, "Humph. That isn't guaranteed." Li Zun shook his head. What? An early core formation cultivator can roam the depths and hunt demon beasts alone? The white-clothed cultivator grew silent before solemnly saying, "He isn't an ordinary core formation cultivator. When you were chatting in the room, I was able to feel someone watching me for some unknown reason. Although he didn't glance in the direction I was hidden, I suspect that he was aware of my existence and only chose not to disclose it." The old man was stunned. He then bewilderedly said, "Are you not mistaken? Your concealment technique is something that even higher-grade cultivators are incapable of uncovering. Don't tell me that this Crooked Soul fellow is actually a late core formation cultivator." The white-clothed man doubtfully said, "That's hard to say. It is quite possible that he cultivates an unusual cultivation art or possesses some peculiar treasure." After circling the room several times, the old man eventually frowned and said, "Leave it be. Regardless of whether this cultivator is exceptional or ordinary, we've already tried our hardest to befriend him. It was the correct decision either way." The white-clothed cultivator nodded in approval and spoke no further. If you enjoy the translation, please consider supporting the novel on Patreon. Every patron counts towards the translation speed goals, no matter how small. I've also started adding future chapters for preview. With enough support, I will be able to translate full-time and release 10+ chapters a week. Chapter 517, Island in the Mist. By the time the white-robed cultivator and the old man finished their discussion, Han Li had already entered a nearby miscellaneous goods store near the Golden Thumb Pavilion. He purchased a map of the local seas and information on the demon beasts that roamed around there before leaving. After finding a secluded area, Han Li started to look through the information. After only a cursory glance, Han Li unconsciously frowned. There were truly far too many dangerous areas in the vicinity of Profound Depths Island. Could it be that high-grade demon beasts often roamed through these areas? As for the location of the famed depths, it wasn't too far away from the island. Han Li would be able to reach it after only flying half a month south at full speed. However, the depths were truly vast, spanning over 5 million kilometers of jagged, uneven territory. This was without even mentioning the territory's unfathomable depths, as no one had yet to truly explore its farthest reaches. After Han Li skimmed once through the jade slip, he quickly put it away. Standing in place with a solemn expression, he lowered his head and began to think deeply. After an unknown amount of time had passed, Han Li raised his head, wearing an indifferent expression. He then directly flew out of Blackrock City without any further deliberation. Upon leaving the city, Han Li immediately turned into a streak of azure light and soared through the skies. Profound Depths Island was a medium-sized island, but apart from Blackrock City, the island was completely barren. Not a single village or town could be seen. For some unknown reason, it seemed that both cultivators and mortals weren't setting up residence on the other parts of the island. Han Li quickly flew away from Wondrous Depths Island. After raising his head to the skies and determining his direction, he headed north. Currently, he wanted to find an island where cultivators scarcely appeared. He didn't want to be in a crowded area and attract attention. As a result, he deliberately chose to fly far away from the Wondrous Depths. There weren't many cultivators in the seas around Wondrous Depths Island. In addition, all those islands had cultivators and mortals residing on them. Han Li didn't bother to stop at any of them and shot past them without regard. It was clear that the northern seas had far fewer cultivators as he had expected. After flying for about 12 days, he sparsely saw any other cultivators. And when he did encounter them, the low-grade cultivators would immediately veer out of his way, and high-grade cultivators would watch him with vigilance. Like other demon beast islands, killing others for their treasures was a common occurrence. Han Li was particularly vigilant as well. After flying for another 2 days and finally seeing no trace of other cultivators, Han Li changed direction and started flying west. According to the map, there would be a few islands with small spirit veins in that direction. As the spirit veins on these islands were low grade, and the distance from the Wondrous Depths was far, along with a complete lack of safety and other various reasons, very few cultivators resided there. In the case of mortals, they all took residence on the islands nearby Wondrous Depths Island, ensuring some degree of safety. Of course, Han Li didn't care about these conditions. He merely wanted to take a look and see if any of the islands were to his liking. About 30 kilometers ahead of him, Han Li spotted a small island. This would be the 4th uninhabited island with a spirit vein he had encountered so far. The island wasn't large, but its terrain was both uncommon and varied. There were barren landscapes, dense forests full of unknown trees, grasslands with beautiful flowers, and even a small mountain range. Han Li swept his spiritual sense over the island and found no traces of any other cultivators staying there. The spirit vein on this island wasn't low-grade. Despite its small size, it was actually a peak mid-grade spirit vein. While it couldn't be considered a top-grade spirit vein, it still released an abundance of spiritual qi. It seemed the reason why other cultivators had left this island alone wasn't due to the spirit vein, but rather the small island's exceptionally strange environment. However, there was something about the island that Han Li fancied in particular, the vast white mist that surrounded it. The mist wasn't natural, it was produced by a few nearby whirlpools. While the mist did cover the island's sides, it didn't surround it from above. Han Li was quite amazed by the sight, but when he dived into the nearby waters and saw the island from underwater, the source of the mist was made clear. At the bottom of the island, there were countless finger-sized holes along with thousands upon thousands of slender silver fish darting through them. While the fish appeared no different from common small fish, after catching one with his hands covered in spiritual power, Han Li discovered that it had no scales. Instead, it was covered in sharp spikes of silver bone. Had an ordinary person attempted to hold it, they would have been left with shredded hands. As Han Li looked at it, a thought suddenly came to mind: sea shredder fish. This small fish is a low-grade one-demon beast that lives in large schools and spouts water out from the surface of the sea as a source of enjoyment. The source of its ridiculous name is likely due to the iron-like spikes protruding from its body. With so many sea shredder fish in the island's vicinity, they were able to spout out enough sea water to completely cover the entire island in mist. It made for a rare sight indeed. If Han Li hadn't encountered a silver-winged bird on his way and chased after it through the fog, he never would have found the island. He undoubtedly would have just brushed past the fog. Seeing a bit of sea mist in the distance was extremely common. After circling around the island several times, he quickly came to the decision to establish his cave residence on this island. What other island could possibly be more secretive and to his liking than this one? The small spirit vein was located on the island's 5-kilometer-long mountain range with a few sparse peaks, the tallest peak reaching 120 meters high. Being so small, Han Li didn't have the option for an expansive cave residence. Hence, he merely looked for a small valley at the bottom of the mountain range and started to tunnel through the stone. With Han Li's current cultivation, it was practically effortless for him to carve out a cave residence similar to his previous one. After a few short days, he managed to finish carving out the general outline of his new residence. Han Li was disinterested in carving out the finer details of his cave residence. Instead, he first set down a few formation tools that he had personally refined, covering both his cave residence and the mountain range in a spell restriction. At a distance, the mountain range could no longer be seen, and was instead replaced by a verdant forest. The illusory forest seamlessly bordered a nearby forest without the slightest flaw. From above, Han Li carefully examined the mountain range with chin in hand and was left feeling somewhat uneasy. If a high-grade cultivator happened to pass through the mist like he had, this restriction wouldn't be enough to fool them. After muttering to himself, an idea suddenly came to mind. Han Li directly flew back to his new cave residence and quickly inspected the materials he had on hand before starting to refine some items in a secret room. 7 days later, Han Li emerged once more from his cave residence with a dozen sets of similar formation tools. These sets of formation flags and formation plates were extremely crude, and by no means impressive. But after Han Li placed them at various areas throughout the small island, streams of mist began to wildly emerge from each of the formations. Soon, the new expanse of mist merged together with the existing mist of sea water to completely envelop the island, hiding it entirely from view. In this manner, any cultivators passing by would find it difficult to spot the island unless they were flying at a low altitude. After examining it from every angle, Han Li finally felt at ease. Although he had spent no small number of spirit stones to activate so many formations, he didn't care in the least. He was more than willing to bankrupt himself to avoid any potential disasters. Han Li then returned to his cave residence with the utmost speed before hammering out some of the finer details of his cave residence, such as his insect room, herb garden, and so on. 2 days later, Han Li was sitting inside a stone room with a solemn expression. He was immersing his spiritual sense into the yellow jade slip that Gu had given to him, carefully sifting through its content. With a twitch of his face, he extracted his spiritual sense from the jade slip and entered a state of deep contemplation. A moment later, he stood up and strolled around the stone room several times before wearing a heavier expression. He then clutched his storage pouch and took out a white jade box. Han Li gazed at it for a moment before slowly opening the box to reveal a few small, rainbow-colored beads. If you enjoy the translation, please consider supporting the novel on Patreon. Every patron counts towards the translation speed goals, no matter how small. I've also started adding future chapters for preview. With enough support, I will be able to translate full-time and release 10+ chapters a week. Chapter 5:18. Flame Mirage Moth. Han Li nimbly grabbed one of the beads within the box and held it between his fingers close to his eye. After staring at it for a moment, Han Li slowly closed his eyes and reviewed the image of what he had seen in the jade slip. The image was of a fist-sized pearl that emitted rainbow light and had over 10 smaller beads floating around it. Those smaller pearls appeared exactly the same as the one currently in his hand. As for the large rainbow pearl, it was the Heaven-Mend pill that he had seen shooting out of the Heaven Void cauldron. This strange image had appeared in the jade slip without the slightest description, provoking an air of mystery. When Han Li had swept his mind past the image in the jade slip he had acquired from Guu, he had been astonished. It was for that reason he had decided to add on a treasure talisman as payment for the jade slip. Were it not for this, he would have only given Guu the medicine pills at most. The jade slip possessed many bizarre images, but each of them lacked any kind of description. There were pictures of magic tools and treasures, as well as many demon beasts and ghostly monstrosities that Han Li had never seen before. After seeing the picture of the Heaven-Mend pill among them, he felt that these images must be extremely significant. Han Li carefully committed these pictures to memory and would treat them with great importance should he see them in the future. However, Han Li glanced at the beads in the case with a trace of awkwardness. There was no doubt that these rainbow beads had a strong relationship with the Heaven-Mend pill. Why else would they appear together in the image? After considering that the beads had been refined from Zenith Brilliance's skeleton, he suddenly recalled Zenith Brilliance's blood jade spiders. Could it be that the Bone Sage's traitorous disciple had entered Heaven Void Hall with the spiders and acquired a Heaven-Mend pill? This was one possible explanation as to why Zenith Brilliance's bones had turned rainbow-colored and why they had formed into beads after being exposed to flames. From Han Li's experience with taking many medicine pills, the Heaven-Mend pill must have either not yet been fully refined, or its medicinal nature was so fierce that it required one to continue strenuously refining it after consumption. From these conjectures and its prominent appearance in the jade slip, it appeared like these rainbow beads held a significant relation towards the Heaven-Mend pearl. Although using a cultivator's body as a pill furnace to produce medicine pills was rarely seen in the cultivation world, Han Li had personally witnessed this once before. The Black Fiend School's blood congealed 5-element cores was one particularly bloody and tyrannical example. But with all this being said, it was only Han Li's wishful thinking in the end. He wasn't about to rashly swallow them without further deliberation. With some further thought, he decided to leave this hidden room and head towards the insect rooms. His current insect rooms weren't as simple as they had been in Heavenly Star City. They were split into 5 stone rooms of differing sizes. Among 2 of these rooms were Han Li's 2 separate groups of gold-devouring beetles. One of the swarms had followed Han Li through Heaven Void Hall in a display of amazing strength, with the tens of thousands gold-devouring beetles having consumed no small number of Ironfire ants. The other swarm was made up of the 1,000 elites he had left in his cave residence at Heavenly Star City. Perhaps due to eating a great number of Ironfire ants, the tens of thousands of gold-devouring beetles appeared to be on the verge of reproducing. They'd already started to devour one another, much to Han Li's pleasant surprise. As for the other stone rooms, one housed Han Li's sole remaining blood jade spider while another room housed his perpetually sleeping weeping soul beast. The final room contained the gold-threaded silkworms he had acquired from Heaven Void Hall. Although Han Li had the weeping soul beast's control pearl in hand, he had always felt hesitant about refining it, and decided to put it away for the time being. Rather, his delay in refining it didn't seem to affect the spirit beast all that much. When Han Li's acquisition of the gold-threaded silkworms hadn't occurred on a whim. They had a position on the list of exotic insects despite being ranked quite low. Although they weren't a match for the blood jade spider, they had a seldomly known second evolution. Given enough time, they could possibly evolve into a flame mirage moth. While they would still be somewhat weaker than the gold-devouring beetles, ranking 17 on the list of exotic insects, they had an innate ability of transformation. While its power was formidable, its description was quite vague. It seems this insect had seldomly been seen even in ancient times. Even if the mirage flame moth's high ranking was somewhat inaccurate, it was by no means insignificant. As such, in spite of the old eccentric's flabbergasted gaze, he had chosen to gather up the gold-threaded silkworms that were on the verge of death. They had been discarded by Wn Qianming without the slightest hesitation, as the gold-threaded silkworms had nearly exhausted the entirety of their origin qi at the time. After acquiring them, Han Li continuously fed them soul-nurturing pills and other rare spiritual medicines. However, all this had seemingly accomplished at this point was prolonging the inevitable. With each passing day, they grew increasingly haggard, and Han Li could only helplessly watch as they continued to decline. At that moment, an idea suddenly came to him. He directly arrived at the gold-threaded silkworm's room and frowned at what he saw through the spell restriction barrier. At that moment, the huge dark green silkworms were motionlessly lying on the ground as if they had already died. Were it not for the faint spiritual qi emitted from their bodies, he would have believed them to be dead. Han Li entered the room without hesitation and circled around the exotic insects for a moment before picking out the male and female silkworms with the strongest spirit amongst them. Afterwards, he took out 2 rainbow beads from the jade box and fed one to each silkworm before leaving the room. Han Li's thoughts were quite simple. Since these insects couldn't be saved, he may as well test the medicinal effects of the rainbow beads. With the grand reputation of the Heaven Mend pill, their medicinal powers should be beyond miraculous. If these beads were as he had imagined and were truly Heaven Mend pills, then he would stand to benefit even if the gold-threaded silkworms couldn't be saved. Naturally, if the gold-threaded silkworms responded negatively to the beads, he would no longer pay any heed to the beads. The following days were spent looking after the 9-curl spirit ginseng with the utmost care. This unique root was of great importance to his later formation of a nascent soul. At the center of his medicinal garden, Han Li sectioned off a small piece of earth. After placing down formation flags that he had specifically refined for the task, the surrounding soil became an impenetrable layer of golden stone. With this, he could finally place the 9-curl spirit ginseng inside with confidence. As for the ginseng's white rabbit spirit incarnation, it was still trapped inside a jade box. Han Li had no intention of keeping it there for long. After all, it could have a negative effect on the spirit ginseng if they were separated for too long. Han Li then brought the talisman-clad jade box into the medicinal garden and placed it at the spirit ginseng's side. After tearing off the talismans and opening the box, a streak of white light shot out of the box and circled around the 9-curl spirit ginseng before disappearing inside it. When Han Li saw this, he wore a knowing smile. It seemed the white rabbit incarnation was filled with trepidation since it had already been captured once before. It was quite timid. But when Han Li glanced at the 9-curl spirit ginseng's body, he began to ponder whether or not the green liquid would have any miraculous effects on it. He then put the thought aside for the time being. The spirit ginseng wasn't going anywhere, and the green liquid was required elsewhere. These tests would have to be saved for later. Furthermore, the green liquid might greatly increase the abilities of the 9-curl spirit ginseng, allowing it to possibly escape from the formation spell and leave him overcome with grief. This wasn't an ordinary plant, but a legendary divine medicinal plant. It was best to be careful. With that thought, Han Li no longer paid any attention to the 9-curl spirit ginseng after successfully containing it. As for the green liquid, Han Li was currently using all of it to mature the soul-nurturing tree, one of the renowned 3 divine woods. Although it was only a small root, Han Li was confident that within several years, it would regrow back into a 10,000-year tree. Originally, Han Li intended to study the Heaven Void Cauldron and see if he could find a way to open it. But in the process, he accidentally stumbled across the bone sage's small rib bone, diverting his interest for the time being. Since it was able to withstand the fearsome sacred azura flames, it should prove to be quite unordinary. Laying down on his bed, he toyed with the sparkling white item in his hand as he curiously glanced at it. If you enjoy the translation, please consider supporting the novel on Patreon. Every patron counts towards the translation speed goals, no matter how small. I've also started adding future chapters for preview. With enough support, I will be able to translate full-time and release 10+ chapters a week. Chapter 519. Profound yin arts. The first thing Han Li realized about the rib bone was that it was obviously not the sage bone's true rib bone. Its current form was merely a trick that the old devil had used to deceive the eyes of others. Without even mentioning the odd material that it had been created from, one could already tell it wasn't any sort of magic treasure from the faint spiritual qi that it released. However, there was no doubt that it was a man-made item. But regardless of whether Han Li immersed it with spiritual sense or spiritual power, the rib didn't respond in the slightest. Han Li furrowed his brow and immediately recalled that the old devil had tread the path of a demon ghost. Perhaps this item required yin soul qi in order to control it. Although Han Li didn't possess any yin soul qi himself, he did have the Soul Congregation Bowl, 1. Acquired in Chapter 330, after Han Li slayed the head of the Black Fiend sect, that he had acquired long ago. He had already consumed all of the yin souls in order to refine his puppets, but the bowl itself still possessed a great amount of yin qi. He took out the Soul Congregation Bowl from his spirit pouch, and casually stared at the pitch-black bowl in his hand before emitting a flash of blue light from his palm. A trace of yin qi then flowed into his body through his hand. After slowly circulating the yin qi throughout his body, he grasped the rib bone with his other hand. Han Li rigidly started at the rib bone as it quickly became enveloped in a ball of icy, black yin qi. The rib bone finally responded. The originally flawless white exterior of the rib bone started to turn black, absorbing the yin qi surrounding it, turning half white and half black. Han Li wasn't particularly surprised by this transformation. He merely raised his eyebrow at the sight. After closing his eyes in thought, Han Li sat up in his bed, suddenly emitting a blinding azure light from the hand holding the Soul Congregation Bowl. At the same time, ghostly wails could be faintly heard from his other hand, gathering an even darker cloud of yin qi around the rib bone. The rib bone wildly devoured the yin qi without the slightest restraint. After the time it took to finish a cup of tea, the rib bone eventually turned completely black. The bone suddenly began to release a low-pitched hum and emitted rays of pitch-black light, filling the room with a freakish, eerie aura. Han Li hesitantly put away the Soul Congregation Bowl and relaxed his grip on the bone, allowing it to float from his hand. The yin qi that had surrounded the bone was then dispersed by the shock of the black radiance that it suddenly emitted. Han Li's gaze continuously flickered as he watched the bizarre scene. Apart from the continuous low-pitched hums and flickers of radiance, the black bone no longer showed other changes. After a moment, Han Li's expression stirred, and he suddenly beckoned towards it. Whoosh! The bone flew into his grasp. After taking another look at it, he immersed his spiritual sense into it. This time, his spiritual sense was no longer obstructed, allowing him to easily enter the rib bone. As a result, black light flashed before his eyes, revealing a stream of huge ancient characters and pictures into his mind. Jade slip. Han Li muttered with an expression of shock. The bone was some sort of unique jade slip, something that he had previously guessed. After restraining the excitement in his heart, he started to earnestly analyze the words within. Profound yin arts. Han Li read through the first half of the words and found them extremely familiar. He was certain that he had read them before. Although he hadn't personally cultivated this renowned devilish Dao cultivation art, his avatar Crooked Soul had refined a derivative of it, the Divine Bloodlight. After reading through it, Han Li came to the conclusion that while the cultivation arts had many minor differences, as a whole they were largely the same. The rib bone jade slip actually contained the so-called profound yin scriptures. To tell the truth, Han Li was somewhat disappointed. Since he already cultivated the azure essence sword arts, he wasn't about to foolishly abandon them to recultivate with this technique even if it did possess an overbearing power. However, he didn't immediately withdraw his spiritual sense from the profound yin scriptures. The Devil Dao secret techniques that were contained in the second half were something that he could possibly cultivate. Soon after Han Li read through each of the unbelievable secret techniques, his original disappointment turned into surprise, then slight solemnness, and finally, excitement. The secret techniques were powerful and truly inconceivable. He was confident that once he cultivated the 9th layer of the azure essence sword arts and the suitable secret techniques of the profound yin scriptures, he would be able to escape from any nascent soul cultivator that crossed his path. No longer would he be doomed to helplessly accept death if he encountered any of those nascent soul eccentrics. Among these secret techniques were Zenith Yin's Heaven-Wide Corpse Fire. As for the Heaven-Wide Demon Corpse, They were merely refined corpses that happened to be produced in the process of refining the corpse fire. Unfortunately, these secret techniques required the profound yin arts as a cultivation base and required a cultivation at the nascent soul stage or higher. Otherwise, he would have definitely attempted to refine it for himself. After all, he had personally witnessed the ferocious power of the heaven-wide corpse fire. But even as powerful as it was, the weaknesses of the heaven-wide corpse fire were made clear from its cultivation chant. When Han Li saw this, he coldly chuckled. If Zenith Yin tried to use heaven-wide corpse fire to deal with him in the future, Han Li would surely give him a nice surprise. After looking through it for a moment more, Han Li was able to find 3 secret techniques that he fancied that a core formation cultivator could refine. He then committed them to memory until he could find the time to cultivate them. Han Li carefully put away the small rib bone. Along with feelings of great satisfaction from what he had gained, he could feel his heart brimming with excitement. It was then that Han Li recalled what he had originally planned. Han Li's hand grasped onto the storage pouch containing the heaven-void cauldron with his curiosity once again set aflame. He instantly stood up from his bed and directly headed towards the hidden room in his cave residence. If he could somehow manage to open the heaven-void cauldron, he could acquire many ancient treasures, not to mention heaven-mend pills. He would be able to substantially increase his strength. With those thoughts in mind, Han Li began a routine where he would observe the gold-threaded silkworms every day before spending the rest of the day studying the heaven-void cauldron. In addition, he would occasionally browse through all sorts of ancient jade slips in an attempt to find any hints regarding a way to open the cauldron. Unfortunately, after half a month passed, Han Li had exhausted all the methods he could think of. He had no choice but to concede that the heaven-void cauldron, the ranked 1 secret treasure in the scattered star seas, wasn't capable of being opened by a mere core formation cultivator such as himself. The cauldron was truly impressive. Be it heat, water, or any of the many treasures that Han Li had used, none of them were able to leave so much as a trace on the cauldron. Even a strike from his recently restored divine Devilbane lightning wasn't able to scratch the heaven-void cauldron. As for other unconventional methods of opening the heaven-void cauldron, Han Li had tried each and every one of them to only be met with failure. In the end, Han Li could only place the heaven-void cauldron back into his storage pouch and leave the matter be. As for Han Li's suspicion that the heaven-void cauldron could be opened with the celestial ice pearl, he didn't dare to test it. The celestial ice flames were an existence that inspired fear even in nascent soul cultivators. He fundamentally had no thoughts of attempting to refine and control the pearl until he reached either the nascent soul stage or perhaps late core formation. Han Li was still able to recognize his own limits. During that half-month, the 2 gold-threaded silkworms that consumed the rainbow beads showed no reaction in the slightest. They remained entirely the same, as if the beads possessed no medicinal qualities at all. As for the tens of thousands of gold-devouring beetles Han Li had brought back with him from Heaven-Void Hall, they had already started cannibalizing each other en masse and were on the verge of laying new eggs, much to Han Li's delight. As of current, Han Li's next matter at hand would be tempering his 72 bamboo cloudswarm swords. He didn't plan on allowing the refined crystal that he had acquired on the path of molten rock to go to waste either. He wanted to temper traces of the crystal into each of his flying swords. While he wouldn't dare to proclaim his bamboo cloudswarm swords as indestructible after the inclusion of the refined crystal, the number of items that could damage them in this world would be very few. It would prove to be quite advantageous in his future battles against high-grade cultivators. However, processing the crystal was an extremely grueling process. As the item itself was an extraordinary material, Han Li reckoned that the crystal would require at least half a year to refine with the aid of formation spells. But if he were to run out of magic power halfway and interrupt the procedure, the crystal would be completely destroyed. This was no joking matter. Originally, he wouldn't have dared to make an attempt with his measly early core formation cultivation, even with the aid of spiritual medicines. However, he now had the myriad-year spirit milk. Although he had used a portion of it in his rush to Heavenly Star City, he still had more than enough to process the crystal. Since he would encounter no small amount of danger in the nearby seas, it was imperative that Han Li tempered his flying swords so that he may withstand any dangers that he encountered. If you enjoy the translation, please consider supporting the novel on Patreon. Every patron counts towards the translation speed goals, no matter how small. I've also started adding future chapters for preview. With enough support, I will be able to translate full-time and release 10+ chapters a week. Chapter 520. Metamorphosis Tribulation. Naturally, Han Li had already constructed a tool refining room in his new cave residence. After placing down another concealment restriction, he brought the refined crystal and myriad-year spirit milk into the formation before tightly shutting the door to the room. The other operations in the cave residence were smoothly taken care of by the huge ape puppets he had left outside while he remained in seclusion. A year silently passed in this manner before one day, something unexpected occurred. Without the slightest warning, a huge rumble suddenly reverberated throughout the cave residence, accompanied by a continuous earthquake. In addition, faint rolls of violent thunder could be heard from the outside. The rolls of thunder grew increasingly louder, as if the entire island was being covered in a violent storm. With a muffled thump, the door of the tool refining room opened. Han Li leapt out of the room with a cold expression, bewilderment clear in his eyes. Upon hearing the huge rumbling outside of his cave residence, he suddenly slapped his hand against a spirit pouch at his waist, causing a yellow streak of light to emerge. It circled around in the air before landing in his palm. It was a faint yellow, meter-long formation flag with a few talisman characters embroidered onto it. Without much thought, Han Li spat out a cloud of azure chi onto the flag, causing it to shine with yellow light. As a cold glint flickered from Han Li's eyes, the flag shot into the earth with a flick of his wrist. The formation flag dug into the earth in the blink of an eye and disappeared from sight. With a muffled incantation of varying tones leaving Han Li's mouth, yet another astonishing scene occurred. As Han Li continued his incantation, the ground and walls began to shine with golden light as if they consisted of raw gold. At the same time, the trembling and frightening rolls of thunder suddenly came to a halt, restoring everything back to normal. When Han Li saw this, his expression relaxed. However, the confusion in his eyes had yet to disappear. He then flew out of his cave residence in a streak of azure light towards the sky. A moment later, Han Li was floating above the small island. Although it was enveloped in a barrier of mist, his sight wasn't obstructed at all, as the mist was the result of his own formation spells. The scene before him caused his expression to change several times. Thanks to the formation spells that he had placed on the mountain range and his cave residence, they were left mostly unharmed. However, the areas outside the formation spell were still groaning from ongoing tremors. Not only were the hills and other tall masses of earth breaking into dust with huge cracks starting to appear throughout the island, but the vegetation had folded into the earth from the violent quaking as well. But that alone wasn't enough to cause Han Li to be at a loss. There were also stormy waves that suddenly surged around the island. 400-meter-tall waves continuously thrashed against the island and washed away the earth, turning nearly half the island into lakes and marshes. Out past the vast ocean mists in the direction of the huge waves, there were monstrous snarls that were inserted among the rolls of thunder as if a mad beast was furiously thrashing about. Each of its roars was soon followed by thunder and a huge wave. Looking in the direction of the huge waves, Han Li thought, could it be that a high-grade demon beast is stirring up havoc nearby? From the earth-shattering scene, it was certain to be a demon beast that possessed a huge body. With that thought, Han Li's curiosity was on the rise. After muttering to himself for a short moment, he enveloped himself in azure radiance and flew straight into the fog towards the directions of the roars. For fear of being seen, Han Li restrained his chi and dimmed the radiance of his aura until it was no longer visible. In an instant, there was no longer any trace of him. After flying into the sea mist, Han Li managed to find his goal with a single glance. Nearby, there was an enormous demon beast wildly thrashing about. Although he had already anticipated this, Han Li took in a cold breath of fright at its size. This giant was the first tortoise-type demon beast he had ever seen. Its body spanned about 3 kilometers in area, and it seemed as if there was a huge mountain floating in the ocean. Its shell was pitch black and it had huge pillar-like legs. It also had a 300-meter-long silver tail that continuously swept at the nearby sea. With the head of an azure flood dragon, the tortoise roared towards the sky. With each of its roars, huge waves and demonic white winds spread outward from its body, thoroughly enveloping the sea in its ongoing outbursts. But what shocked Han Li the most wasn't this, but the dense black clouds that the tortoise was roaring at tens of thousands of miles in the sky. Dense overlapping bolts of lightning struck down from the black skies to form fearsome webs of lightning around the demon tortoise, continuously striking at it. The tortoise relied on the huge waves and demonic winds to forcibly block the strikes of the heavenly lightning. Although it managed to remain unharmed, it became increasingly violent as the barrage continued, gradually turning its originally emerald green eyes to red. Metamorphosis tribulation. Han Li muttered to himself with a bewildered expression. He blinked in shock. The metamorphosis tribulation is a tribulation of heavenly lightning that all demon beasts experience when they ascend from grade 7 to grade 8. After experiencing this tribulation, the demon beast will be able to shed off its bestial form and change into a more human-like form. And as their cultivation grows deeper, so will the intensity of their transformation as well. It was said that when a demon beast reached grade 10, they were completely indistinguishable from a human. Although Han Li had encountered this information many times in jade slips, he was now witnessing the scene with his own eyes. He didn't know whether he should consider himself fortunate or unlucky. Its appearance could be considered fortunate as it answered Han Li's doubts about whether or not grade 8 demon beasts resided near Wondrous Depths Island. This gave him hope of finding Thousand Leaves Dew later on. Unfortunately, after its tribulation, the demon beast would likely set up its nest in the nearby water. Han Li had no interest in becoming neighbors with a grade 8 demon beast. It may be a grade 8 demon beast that had just ascended, but it would still be quite difficult for Han Li to evade its notice. It was still unable to find his cave residence while it was a grade 7 demon beast. But after it reached grade 8, its strengthened spiritual sense would pose a problem. Perhaps one day, the demon tortoise would arrive at his cave residence. When it came to enforcing their own territory, high-grade demon beasts weren't exactly known to be lenient. Could it be that I will have to discard my cave residence after having only just established it? Han Li flusteredly thought. The flying swords contained in his body began to shake with excitement. By the time he was forced out of seclusion, he had already finished tempering his 72 bamboo cloudswarm swords with the refined crystal. It had been significantly more difficult to process the refined crystal than he had anticipated. His original estimate of half a year had actually stretched into nearly an entire year. With that done, Han Li decided to take advantage of the continued seclusion to specially temper his flying swords. Were it not for the disturbance of the demon beast, he would have likely spent several more months in seclusion. I should take this opportunity to launch a surprise attack while its origin chi is still greatly damaged after it finishes its tribulation. If I am able to kill it, it would be a cause for joy. But if I fail, I will have to leave the island. With that thought, Han Li's heart grew tense. But a moment later, he shook his head in rejection of the idea. Even when greatly weakened, he still wouldn't prove to be an opponent of a grade 8 demon beast. Han Li didn't know precisely how powerful grade 8 demon beasts were, but he had personally witnessed the earth-shattering strength of the divine abilities of nascent soul cultivators. With such great danger, it would be better to just pack up and leave. Unfortunately, his gold-devouring beetles were laying eggs. He wasn't sure what would happen if he were to bring them along in his storage pouch, but he didn't have much choice. Han Li watched the lightning flicker against the body of the huge tortoise and sighed before returning to his cave residence. Han Li didn't want to wait for the demon beast to finish its tribulation and discover him hiding away. That would be utterly disastrous. But just as Han Li turned around, a series of sharp whistles came from across the horizon, accompanied by flickers of golden light. Then from the opposite horizon, a melodious sigh of wind spread throughout the sky, making way for a red streak of radiance that flew over. When Han Li saw this, he unconsciously frowned. But before he could respond, a huge disturbance in the sea rose from near the huge turtle. Several tens of thick pillars of fire shot out of the sea, and the sea water began to quickly rise as if something gigantic was emerging from the sea. Han Li was greatly shocked by this and hastily shot away to conceal himself before watching the scene with amazement. With a flash of blue light, a huge red beast emerged from the parted waves. Upon revealing itself, it released a horse-like neigh at a monstrous volume, leaving Han Li's ears buzzing. Stunned, Han Li nearly fell from the sky. He hastily released magic power to steady himself. As he quickly circulated his great development arts throughout his body, Han Li stared at the strange demon beast with a pale face full of awe. If you enjoy the translation, please consider supporting the novel on Patreon. Every patron counts towards the translation speed goals, no matter how small. I've also started adding future chapters for preview. With enough support, I will be able to translate full-time and release 10+ chapters a week.